So good evening and welcome to Legacy in Motion. Tonight's conversation is a very personal and meaningful one. The name Wantok production was chosen by me back in 2000 as a tribute to the people and cultural philosophy of Papua New Guinea. Long before I ever imagined having the opportunity to connect directly with voices from the country itself. The word Wantok represents community, belonging, mutual care, and shared humanity, values that continue to inspire me deeply. It is a real honor to welcome Sir Ivan Kila, father, educator, lifelong learner, and founder of PNG Kantri Blo Yumi. Through his work with his son Elijah, Sir Ivan has created a platform focused on national unity, emotional intelligence, leadership, and social awareness in Papua New Guinea. As Papua New Guinea celebrated 50 years of independence in September 2025, tonight's conversation is not only about one man's journey, but also about the strength, challenges, and the future of a nation. Welcome to Legacy in Motion, sir.
Obrigado, Wantok. Thank you so much for having me here. It was quite an introduction. I don't think I deserve most of the accolades, but hope we can build a legacy going into the future. Thank you once again.
Sir, you describe yourself first as a father. Why is fatherhood the primary lens through which you define your identity?
Thank you, Corinne. For me, it would be, I'm glad you asked that question because it goes back to one of the most important things I've learned over the past 30 years. And it's something you also mentioned, and that's to do with values. Initially, I took it as being responsible. Like if a man can have a child, is man enough to have a child, then they have to be responsible to bring them up. But going back to values, something that was ingrained in me with a strict disciplinary dad who taught me values that are later nurtured, like work and career, working hard, being ambitious, and family is one of them. Unconditional love, encouragement, forgiveness, and all those that go with values. So I'd say it was my values that, looking back, uh, helps me to identify myself as a father, first and foremost.
And looking back to 1995, when you first became a father, how did that responsibility reshape your life trajectory?
Yes, talking about trajectory, I didn't know much back then because as I was just 20 years of age and my son's mom was a few months younger than me. So we were more or less like kids ourselves, immature. And in terms of trajectory, I don't think I really had any goals at that time. It was just to get through university. We didn't have things like GPA. So I thought I'd just get through with the lowest marks possible. However, it also introduced me into other, like we could say, factors, like having in-laws. When you start off a relationship, they say it's like the honeymoon period. And then when kids come in, it's just a whole new ball game. I guess something I was not ready for, but I had the loving help of my family, especially my parents.
How old
So I guess it flatlined my trajectory.
and how old were you?
I was 20 at that time, 20 years old.
And you mentioned experiencing failures before returning to university, right? What did
Right.
those setbacks teach you about resilience and dignity?
Right. Thank you. Yes, it taught me to be hungry and to stay hungry. Having failed for the first time in my second year of school, that happened after a tragic car accident where I almost lost my life. And I was told to either I turned up late for an exam. I showed this in one of my videos.
Let's get back to, I would say, the studies. As someone who studied psychology later in life, how did education change your understanding of yourself and of society, Ivan?
Thank you. Yes, studying psychology was, I guess it was fate for me because my father wanted me to study law, and I ended up marrying someone who studied law. So I thought I ticked that box. But it was looking back then, psychology was not seen as a like a high core subject as opposed to law, engineering, and medicine. But I'm so glad I studied psychology because it's like the study of the mind. And going back to university late, I must admit that when I went back for my undergraduate studies around 2004, I was not that switched on, but it taught me how to set goals and to work towards that goal no matter what came up, uncertainty and all that. So going back to study initially taught me to set goals and to revise them almost every day like an obsession and to achieve them. But I never really knew what I know now after my undergraduate studies.
And you completed a graduate diploma in business administration while already carrying family and social responsibilities. What motivated you to continue learning despite the pressures?
Thank you. The thing that really motivated me was because I refer to her as my former partner. She had already obtained a master's degree, and she did that while caring for our children in Australia. And also, when I joined the department that I worked for, I was one of the last persons to go for studies. I had applied to go to Australia, but that also coincided with me being kind of promoted at work. So I thought I've been to Australia before, I'll let somebody else go. But I guess the main reason why I wanted to go back to studies was being one of the last ones to go at work and also to prove that to myself that I was no slouch, that I could actually succeed at that level.
And how has psychology influenced the way you communicate with your audience online?
Thank you. Yes, that is really important because I realize now that going back for in line with your previous question, it flows through. Uh, Going back to postgraduate studies, initially I thought it was a normal classroom setting and I was not prepared for it. I didn't have a mobile phone nor a laptop. So I turned up to school here in Port Moresby and find out that it's an online course. And so I'd catch the bus to the school to use the computers. And that happened after COVID. So that was in 2022. And it was just like a new ball game for me. And being exposed to professionals in Australia online was just like a dream. And I guess that nurtured or gave me the confidence to communicate online,
In
taught me the
many
value.
societies, in many societies, even men are often discouraged from speaking openly about emotional struggle. Why
Yeah.
did you decide to discuss mental health challenges publicly? What was the trigger?
The trigger would have been me myself going through it. I've been through it almost most of my life, getting having children early and then going through a lot of depression myself and just going with it for the past 30 years. Also, also here in Papua New Guinea, we have what they call the gender equality movement, domestic violence. Previously, men were to be blamed for all that. However, from my past experience and reading in the newspapers, it is kind of turned over, and women also can take advantage of it. So it's like both sides of the coin. And apart from that, I've also learned from going online. I first got into YouTube in 2019. So I've come across influencers like Andrew Tate who talk about toxic masculinity, and also from a bit of research, I think the previous generations were men were much stronger than the current generation. Like my dad, I could class my dad as one of them. With He was physical, play rugby, he was strong, and I also think that that has a lot to do with the internet, with access to the digital world. Because before that, a lot of things, especially things that are not good for kids, are on the internet, and that goes with big data and what we focus on. And I think that has made men weak. And when I look around in society in PNG, there are a lot of men and women too that are going through what I went through, and I'm just so glad that I am now in a mental state where I can be able to help others
Can
to
we
get
get
over.
back? Can we get back to what happened or what was really the trigger and to this mental health issue, if you don't mind? And then I would like to know, how did faith and family help you navigate that difficult period? Um,
All right, thank you. I had the trigger. That is really good. Sorry, I went past it. My sons had mental health illness towards the end of 2025 in October, and I had never talking about faith. I I've been like in and out of church since I was a kid. Human nature, we all fall, we all get up again, and it's all about picking ourselves up and just keep on going on. And my sons, I was estranged for them for since 2012. So it was like 12 years since I saw them, and I was missing them so much. My children got to the stage where I thought I'd never see them again. My daughter, my last daughter, happened to fracture her finger, and I was given a call early in the morning, and this was the PNG Independence Weekend back in 2024. So we actually had surgery on my daughter's little pinky on Independence Day, 16th of September 2024. PNG turned 49, and that's when I reunited with my kids. And so my son moved in with me in December of 24. And after about 10 months, we had mental illness, manifestation of the spiritual world. And I went through about 3 to 6 months just recently of being bombarded, uh, even sleeping in a tent and fearful of whatever attacks that were coming my way. And that brought me closer in my faith. I read through the scriptures and realized in Isaiah that we should not fear these things, that we should stand up against them. And because that happened in my face it was not only my first son, but my third son, Elijah, that also went through it. So I had a double dose of it. And with God's grace and mercy, and also by turning towards medication, I can say that my two sons are fine now today. And that has given me that motivation and zeal to help others who have gone through the same thing or who are going through the same thing.
And you talked earlier about toxic masculinity. What is that for you? How would you describe it? Here in Europe, we talk a lot about pedophilia, and this is a big
Mm,
sexual harassment is a big topic now, and
right.
everybody is like liberating speech. So yeah, maybe we could discuss and have your opinion a little bit on these issues.
Yes. With toxic masculinity, the way I would look at it is that it's about men asserting themselves as maybe greater than women and kind of looking down at them. That's what I see it as. Whereas in today's day and age here in PNG, we try to have more equality and go into what you said about pedophilia. That's also a term that I came across growing up and enjoying reading books and learning. And that has happened here in PNG, though it's not really that much of an issue. Uh, it appears in the media with certain officials, but there's not much talk about it here. Though, yeah, it does appear in the papers. Yeah.
Well, let's change the topic.
Thank you.
The term Wantok is often translated simply as one talk, but anthropologically it carries much deeper social meaning. How do you personally define Wantokism?
Right. As I did mention in one of my videos, I keep referring to that. One of my lecturers, I'll give him the accolades. Daniel Aloy, he spoke about Wantokism. And when I first heard it, I thought, oh, that's a good way of putting the word. Wantok system is like a mouthful. So Wantokism, that's much easier to say. And my interpretation of it here in PNG, we look at it as like to do with relatives, someone who you're related with, and it was quite surprising and also kind of nice to hear you talk about one talk system, and that's how we actually connected, which is quite amazing. So when I look at it, it's like a language, one talk. When I look at it again, so apart from our narrow view of it as here in PNG as someone you're related to, or even in the Melanesian context, we've got Melanesians, Polynesians, and Micronesians in the Pacific. So it's mostly within Melanesians that we refer to each other as one talks, because maybe because of the talk pissing dialect, like we say, broken English. And this interaction here kind of expands my thinking of one talk. Like you're in Portugal, I'm from PNG, but we're speaking the same language. Yeah.
And what impact did that idea have on your intellectual development?
It really didn't strike me at the time, but I guess as I've grown older into my 50s now, it has helped me to understand that we may be of different race or we may be of different ethnicism, but at the end of the day, we're all one talks. we're gonna end up in the same place, and it doesn't matter. We all bleed red.
Do you believe the traditional Wantok system remains strong in modern Papua New Guinea, or is it changing under globalization and digital culture?
That's another good question, challenging one. I believe that the one talk system here traditionally in PNG is still strong, but that also comes in with it can be either negative or positive. On the negative side of things, it's when nepotism is involved, especially like on the work front. I've been exposed to it a bit, and I was lucky enough to also be recruited through Wantoks. And I guess it's about recruiting on the work front. It's about recruiting those who are qualified and can do the job. So it is going strong here in PNG, and it is a negative thing when it involves nepotism. I hope I've answered the question.
Definitely. From your perspective, Sir Ivan, what do outsiders most misunderstand about Papua New Guinea?
Yes, thank you for that one. What I think outsiders misunderstand most about Papua New Guinea, there's probably a couple of reasons. One would be crime, a lot of negative press from the foreign world, especially those closer to PNG, think that Papua New Guinea is a crime-infested place. And what I'd say to that is, I think we do have, it's like a phenomena, a global happening that occurs everywhere. We have good people and bad people everywhere, no matter what race we are. And secondly, just doing some, knowing that you studied anthropology, I tried to do a bit of research around Papua New Guinea's evolution and also realized that it was back in the 1500s when Portuguese explorers first came to our shores. So that would mean that PNG was a bit late in terms of civilization, whereas we have other places in the world, in the regions that were already civilized thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago. So one thing that a lot of people from or foreigners would take wrong about PNG is that we're still in the Stone Age era, and that's something I did read about. So it was like PNG was first civilization began, especially with the help of missionaries about 100 years before we gained independence. And at that time, there was practice of tribalism, cannibalism, and all that. So probably the world thinks that it's still the same, but that's not the case
You're here
today.
to prove
Yeah.
the truth.
Thank you.
Papua New Guinea contains extraordinary linguistic and cultural diversity. How can national unity be built without erasing local identities?
Yes, I think that question would probably draw us back to the name of your podcast, not quite legacy, but one talk. I think because if we look back at the Tower of Babel in the Bible, we profess to be a Christian country in PNG, and it's also been legislated recently. And when you look at the Tower of Babel, the people were building this tower until God confused the languages. So it is the belief here in PNG because we have more than about 700 different languages and dialects that most of the people from the Tower of Babel ended up here. And I think That's one reason that has hindered our growth as a country is that we have so many different languages and we prefer English. My dad always discouraged me from speaking in Tokpisin or Motu, which are our other major languages, three of them. And he thought that Tokpisin was like a bastard language, broken English. So I would think that for more national unity in PNG, we would use a bit of, we talk about emotional intelligence, common sense, and like today, when you walk around, you hear someone speaking in their language and then someone else in another language. And sometimes you pretend that you understand what they're saying. And other times people say they're probably swearing at us. And with a bit of emotional intelligence, maybe more awareness could be made about like just speaking one language in public places, whether it be English or talk piecing. Because
And
in today's era, yeah, sorry, yeah,
sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead,
I was
go
gonna
ahead.
say, I was gonna say in today's era, it's like English is for the whole of PNG. Initially, we were Papua and New Guinea. So Papua was ruled by the British and New Guinea by the Germans. So we see the Motu language as Papuan and Tok Pisin as New Guinean. However, these days the Motuan language seems to be dying out and there's more focus on Tok Pisin. So you can
Mm.
ask your question. Sorry for disturbing.
My next question is about cultural values. What cultural values from Papua New Guinea do you believe the modern world urgently needs to learn from?
Yes, cultural value that I would think of, considering taking into consideration that we're made up of so many tribes and different languages, is that of peaceful living in peaceful coexistence. PNG could be looked at as like we've got 22 provinces. So it's like 22 countries on one landmass. Everyone's like just so different. Yeah. And so I think that the world could learn that even though you're of a different race or ethnicism, that you can still try to get along and live peacefully together.
And
That would be the main.
how do you balance
Sorry,
pride in tradition with the realities of modernization and political transformation?
pride. Yeah, that's a big one, especially when we look at the political scene here in PNG. The pride comes with like the big man culture. They like to say daddy boss. So in in traditional culture, we have the chieftain system where it was passed down through generations. And the chief would be, like, for example, my dad, he was the first boy, even though he was third born. But because he was the first son, he took on the responsibilities of being the leader. And that also comes with a lot of expectations. So in the traditional culture, the chief always lived up to that. But in today's day and age, with technology and the internet, there are a lot of things that could be hidden back then, but are clear now. So it's important that to to live a life of integrity because you could get caught out anyway if you did something wrong, especially in public. And so in today's society, for those who would like to be leaders, I think the best thing would be to just kind of live a sedentary life, to stay away from getting into trouble where people see you. And maybe the advice would be to, this is what I got from my mentor, who is also kind of a leader. and that's to work hard in silence, live a sedentary life, do your research, and the results should show.
What was the emotional moment or realization that finally pushed you to launch PNG Kantri Blo Yumi on 18th of October 2025?
Thank you, Corinne. That question like just seems to flow with what we're talking about. Like I spoke about my mentor as a leader, and I was so blessed to have my journey cross paths with, like, I'd say, the latest dynamic leader, political leader here in PNG. Is now the PNG opposition leader. And the thing that makes it so kind of amazing is that we're also from different parts of the country. We're both from different parts of the country, but when our paths first crossed, it was like we knew each other for ages. And so my mentor, who is about 5 years younger than me, that's the other kind of extraordinary thing. He, we refer to him as coach, and he got voted into parliament in 2022 and just came in with this like new energy and new vision. And in 2022, he wrote an article, and it was a Christmas message to the people of PNG. And in that article, there was this thing about Kantri Blo Yumi, the the initials KBY. And what is stated in the message was to not let this word country blowing me, like, we don't forget about it. And the more I kept thinking of it, like right now, PNG, because of our cultures, there's so much division. And going back, I don't like talking about this, but like my former partner married someone from another region, like the area where my mentor is from. And to show real forgiveness, I embraced the other culture, the other region. And my paths crossed with the leader, like that just solidified everything. And I'd say through God's grace and that forgiveness, it makes you like want to love your enemies and to bring to bring unification. PNG may be seen as like Africa, and Africa, like they talk about Pan-African movement being one nation. And right now, with the issues that the country is going through, the provinces want to split apart, starting with our province of Bougainville. There was civil war there back in the 90s, and the PNG, the way it looks, the Bougainvilleans want their independence, but PNG doesn't want to let them go because once Bougainville goes, then the other provinces would also like autonomy. So there's a lot going around, like on the political scene and socially, affected the country economically, though we're supposed to be rich. And I think it comes back to like united we stand, divided we fall. And to me, that is like my faith in life, to to preach it, to get the propaganda out. Yeah, like when we look back in history, we read that Hitler changed the minds of people through propaganda and awareness. And the only way that we can bring change for our future generations is by being united.
Why was it important that your son Elijah be part of this project with you?
Yes, with Elijah, he's more into content. Sorry, he's more into online trading, and because he hasn't like done the research or look for a mentor, it was more like gambling for him. And when I started to, when I tried to start the channel, it was like a 2 year vision or a dream. I went back to school and was given an assessment to do a video that I knew nothing about. And for 2 years, I hadn't done anything, so busy with other stuff. And so Elijah, the part where he helped me in was with the technical side, like converting a YouTube video or a Facebook video into a normal video and that sort of thing. But then we also challenged each other that we said in 12 months' time, let's see who's the first to make this X amount of money. And so it was good for Elijah to, he also helped me get the whatever creation we done onto TikTok from YouTube. And then him and my big son Iga, who studied this IGA, who studied aviation, where the both fell into mental health illness. So a week after I got my first videos out, I lost my laptop and Elijah felt ill, but now he's back and determined to look for a mentor for his online trading. But it
What
was important
happened?
that he,
And what
yeah,
happened with the laptop? How did you lose your laptop?
that's a really good question. I was talking about spiritual attacks, and when I was fearful of like whatever evil spirits that manifested, we can't deny that we also live in a spiritual world. Destroyed the laptop. I was trying to combat it with preaching from the scriptures,
Wow.
and yeah, just out of this world, the laptop got just held down to the ground. It was like the enemy was just totally
And
against.
I mean with invisible force.
Yes, yes, getting
Wow.
hold through manifestation of my son. Yeah,
Ah.
yeah. And at that time, just to add a bit more context, at that time, content creation was something I voiced with my kids. And so my big son went through a period where he did not know what he was doing, but he went a bit viral on TikTok here in PNG, like for the wrong reasons. So going back to one of your questions also, starting or going online to advocate on mental health illness is also a way of maybe some sort of revenge to the enemy. Yeah,
And your channel addresses politics, humanitarianism, emotional intelligence, and leadership. Why did you
right.
choose such a multi-dimensional approach rather than focusing only on news?
Yeah, Corinne, your questions just all seem to be flowing like with what we are discussing. Because, we talk about my laptop going missing, and that like coincided my mom. So I didn't create content for about 3 months. And when it got to January and I started going back to work, I just thought I'd just take random videos while traveling to work. And then, because I couldn't create much without a laptop, so right now my channel just kind of copies and pastes news, political news. Um, so probably that answers one part of the question and uh, addresses it. However, with dynamic leadership and emotional intelligence and lifelong learning, those are what I learned in the postgraduate course. It was a Masters of Business Admin course for 24 months, which I completed 18 months. And part of the reason why I resigned from my past job is that they couldn't assist me with the tools to move on with my studies. Because back then, my laptop in my business, I spilled coffee into my laptop, which I had for about 18 months. and it came closer to the exams, and I was stressing. And I was so lucky I had a colleague who I helped familiarize himself with the learning platform. He got me a laptop. So I'm going off trajectory with our discussion here, but
And
yeah, there's the
talking
reason
now,
why. Yeah,
Sir Ivan, talking now about responsibility. What responsibility comes with speaking publicly about national issues in Papua New Guinea today?
yes, that is a kind of a delicate topic. Uh, Recently in PNG, if I just go straight to that, they've introduced this Cybercrime Act where those who go kind of out of context or over criticize politicians, they can be taken to court with a fine of 25,000 kina. That would be about, I'd say maybe we divide it by five with the US dollar, maybe about 10,000 US dollars. Or for those who commit the crime at the corporate level, it could even be 25 years of imprisonment. So the responsibility that we have is to keep whatever we're creating in line within those boundaries. And what I do most is just look at what's printed by our leader, what's publicly released, and just work on that. There's not a lot of kind of commentaries on media releases. Even the journalists back here in PNG are also criticized widely for not being that investigative in their probing. Usually, like we just recently, we had a healthcare crisis, and that came to light because of an Australian journalist with SBS Dateline who came in and exposed it and spoke to the health minister and just brought everything into the public's attention. So that responsibility also comes with the journalists not kind of doing what they really should or their potential according to their potential. So yeah, it's the responsibility that we have to be careful.
Your channel title emphasizes Kantri Blo Yumi, your country. What does ownership of the nation mean to you personally, Ivan?
Another wonderful question, Corinne. To me, ownership, because when I studied psychology back in undergraduate level, I also was I was advised to study strategy, and in strategy, my lecturer is now one of the kind of a big advisor for the government. He always spoke about ownership, about awareness and advocacy. So it's good to write up plans and strategies, but we need ownership of that. And it all comes back to, I would bring it back to PNG's, like we have five directive principles, five national goals and directive principles, and a few of them talk about equal participation, equality, and then we also have what they call the Vision 2050. So the architecture, it was released in 2010, is a 40-year plan. And so a vision is like a roadmap from here to there. And my criticism on this vision, with both at the political level and the bureaucratic level, is that not enough ownership and advocacy has gone out for that. And because of that, like how can the people take ownership of it? And that's kind of in line with what we're trying to do now, is that if the government cannot do advocacy and awareness, then we can use these sort of platforms to get the message out to the people, like those in the rural dwelling settings, and they understand that these are the standards that have to be reached, and whether we are achieving them or not. especially with the national elections coming up again next year. Yeah, after 5 years.
In your opinion, what are the greatest obstacles currently preventing transformative change in your country?
I think that's an easy one. One of the greatest ones, which is, excuse me, which is widespread in PNG, is that of corruption. We've had successive governments that maybe dating back to as early as independence. The first few years after independence was good. We still had evidence of our colonizers, Australia especially, evident in society, like in our schools, the infrastructure we had. We never had many blackouts then. And corruption, when we go through the year, dates back, sort of was highlighted in 2011. And at that time, we called the government the kitchen cabinet. And then we had a change of government, which brought a lot of development, but also a lot of questions posed by the people. And so the former prime minister stepped down with integrity. And from my view and perspective, I believe that the former prime minister has learned from his mistakes and he'd come back as a bigger and better person. However, there's a lot of ego within the political ranks and maybe unforgiveness. And so we had a new prime minister in 2019, and the prime minister came in with slogans like the richest black PNG country, the richest black Christian country, and that we would not import rice by 2025 and many few others promises. But to this date, inflation has hit high in PNG. We have been ranked as grey listed by the FATF. I think it's a committee that goes against money laundering and global terrorism. So that kind of shows that or confirms that corruption is the biggest problem in PNG. There has to be more accountability and transparency with public funds. And having worked with the department that was supposed to be transparent with public funds, not much was done about our reports back then by those higher up in the bureaucracy. And I don't think we were lucky to be taught by our friends from Canberra, Australia. I don't know. I don't think a lot of people know the technicalities of producing reports. And so those just get dusted under the carpet. And corruption is indeed the biggest hurdle here in PNG.
You speak about revolutionary transformative change. What would that transformation look like concretely for ordinary citizens?
Yes, when you talk about that, I kind of picture developed nations like maybe Portugal, Australia, especially our closest neighbors. Because I've been to Australia a few times, and we've got trains, we've got public transport that run with timetables. Whereas here in PNG, we don't have those things. In a couple of the video shots I put out, I showed the transport system here. And so my vision of transformation would be those sort of things, those sort of facilities here in PNG. But that's more like the external things we see. And it's more for me, it's more to do with internally that change. And I also learned about revolutions, paradigm shifts back in my at undergraduate level. And I think the main reason why this is because from my research, revolutions occur every 50 years. And because PNG turned 50 last year, we're due for a revolution. I
How
think
do
that was
you,
from Emmanuel. Sorry,
uh-huh.
I think that was from
How
Emmanuel.
do you define dynamic leadership even in the context of PNG?
Yeah,
Dynamic leadership.
dynamic leadership to me, from what I learned, uh, in my postgraduate studies, it's not about a title or about a position in a hierarchy, but it's to be able to influence others and like creating a movement. So when there's a movement, there's a leader. And I'm not sure if you come across this video, the dancing guy, where it talks about, it's a video show where it talks about movements, where the leader starts dancing and just has to take one nut to get to go and dance with him for others to come in. And so, sorry, can you get the question again?
It's your definition about dynamic leadership
Yeah.
in
So
the
for me,
context of PNG. How would you
yes, so
define
being,
dynamic leadership? Are you
yes,
okay?
so
Do you want
being,
to drink some water? Do you have water next to you or something?
I've got coffee here,
Me too.
PNG flag. Yeah, so for me in the PNG context, it would be more about consistency and living up to your values. Like it's dynamic leadership. Leadership is fighting for the vulnerable, for mothers and children, for those who don't have shelter, homeless, for those who don't have food and water, and doing it consistently, not just one day getting up and making a statement and then going into slumber for the next few weeks or months, but just tapping away at it, like trying to make a hole in a dam, and then once it gets bigger, then it just all flows, and like that would be the dynamics of it, consistently and just keep on pushing relentlessly.
Which current social issues concern you the most for the younger generation?
Yes, for me, the current social issues, apart from what we see externally, is mainly to do with our inner being. They talk about motivation. Just forgot what it is. Extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. So here in PNG, back in the day, growing up in high school, even when we walked out of school, we had to have our uniform shirts tucked into our pants. We couldn't afford to be caught smoking in public. But nowadays, it just happens everywhere. And of course, challenges provide opportunities. Like we could just take footage of them and get them reported, but that don't really help much. So I would think that for the future generation to go within themselves, to go back to the roots of the Christian foundation of this country, because we know that we're in a world that our battle is not against flesh and blood. And the other thing, the difference that I came across in studies is to do with Hofstede's 6 dimensions of culture. And one of the biggest one is individualism versus collectivism. Like in the developed world, in Australia, for example, kids can leave their homes at 18 and they learn to be independent. Whereas here in PNG, we have grown-ups still living with our parents, with our children. And if you were to walk around or observe the community here in PNG, the kids just all walk in groups. And there's a lack of emotional intelligence, which would be the one thing I am coming to. Because the first 2 points I see in emotional intelligence is awareness of self and an awareness of others. And right now in PNG culture, there's not much of that happening. And that was the reason why I had to move out of my previous neighborhood, because you try to study and someone yelling on that end, someone else is on the top of the voice in their language. And like, how can we progress or how can we evolve when there's a lot of noise in society. Even when the kids are walking home, they're just yelling at each other like someone probably 50 meters away. And for those who've gone through life and who have matured, we can see that like those sort of attitudes and behaviors are not needed. And going back to, excuse me, the beginning of our conversation where we spoke about values, I went through in my journey of getting out of depression and coming to the stage where I am now. I did quite a bit of research on self-help, which also led me to the law of attraction. That's kind of new age. But I also learned that whether it's new age or old age, the truth is the truth. And that goes to like our affirmations, what we what we speak to ourselves and all that. So it comes from my research. I believe that we say that we have an attitude problem here in PNG. And if you think of an iceberg model, those elements above the waterline, like they are just there for show, like the way we dress or the music we listen to. However, those aspects below the waterline, that's where we talk about our values, our beliefs, our attitudes, our behaviors. And I came across this book uh, of goals written by Brian Tracy, and he spoke about the core of personality. It's like concentric rings, like an onion, and the innermost core of personality, according to Brian Tracy, is values. So, what are our values? Are our values about work, career, about family, or health and fitness, or are our values about being successfully financially? And we say that attitude is the problem here in PNG, but it's like the outer rings, in the innermost ring is that of values. So if we could get this down to the future generation about developing those values and being emotional intelligent, I think that would help a lot. Just to add on quickly, when I did my online studies with a university in Australia, it was mentioned that these days in Australia, they don't really go for the intelligence quotient, IT, but it's more to do with the emotional intelligence or the emotional quotient. And with technology, I think that that is in line with progressing, especially for PNG.
You made the perfect transition to the next question. What
Yeah.
role can digital platforms like YouTube play in political education and civic awareness in PNG, Papua New Guinea?
Obrigado. Thank you.
It's
Yeah,
yeah, it's
I don't.
midnight for me, so
I'll
sorry, I
try
was
to
a bit
bring more,
slow asking the
bring more
question.
energy. I'll
Yeah.
try to bring more energy. Yes.
Basically,
Right
it's
now,
about the role of digital platforms.
yeah.
Mm.
No, it's that's a really good question again, because right now we've got Facebook in PNG, which kind of blew up in 2009. For me, I discovered YouTube in 2019, and it is no, we cannot deny that Facebook platforms here in PNG are toxic, um, because of the lack of education, especially going down to rural areas. We have our people on Facebook who kind of talk nonsense most of the time. Apart from that, because of technology, people don't do spell checks anymore. So we've got the platform there full of nonsense, full of rubbish, and also the narrow-minded view of emotional intelligence, of against emotional intelligence. So I think it is up to those of us who were probably educated earlier, who were lucky or blessed to be taught by, say, expatriates or who have been exposed to that level of education to use platforms in social media to kind of bring out the good news of how we can evolve as a country. And for me at this point, maybe there could be a further change in curriculum um, on the study scene. But I think what I learned, I don't really mind not going back to complete the MBA for 6 months because I think I've learned what I ought to learn. And I was also taught that these days you don't need to go stand in a line to register for a business course. It's already there on YouTube. And you could drive around while driving around, listen to content that it's like you earn an informal degree in 4 years on any subject. So of that's the power that technology can bring to us, to Papua New Guineans. Instead of driving around with road rage, we probably learn something while moving around. Yeah.
So let's move to independence, history, and national
Yeah.
reflection. All right. Are you still
Yeah.
good? Yes.
I'm good. I hope and pray you're good. Last bit of energy to get through this.
You stated that
Yeah.
independence was granted on a golden platter by Australia and England in 1975. What do you think PNG has done well since independence?
Yeah, that's another good question. Oh, there's not much that I see that has been done well apart from living peacefully and in coexistence. Let me think. What has PNG done well? I think what we've done well is when we go back to our origins, we've advanced. Um, we've got more educated people here who are leading the way, and we cannot deny that development has come through. Also, maybe coming back to my readings on colonization and moving forward, one thing that most people in PNG wish we never, or some wish we never gained independence, that we stayed with Australia and probably would have better infrastructure. But there's also the other side of the coin, because we lived in tribes and most of it there was war ongoing, like tribal war, which a bit is still occurring now. And that's one area that we have progressed, is that from the colonial days, and that also made us fight with our colonizers or our ancestors. And because our colonizers were more developed, that come with firepower. And the thing that, without being racist, I'm not one, is that we had like this boss mentality in the past, where even like the natives were not allowed to go into certain areas, they were off limits. And I think the biggest thing out of that is that we've kind of become our own, we've found our own, the like, I don't know what the word is, I can't think of the word, but we found our true selves, not being pushed around. But there's always both sides of the coin, and it can also be hurting us also. But
It's
yeah, it
kind
would
of a,
be,
maybe it's a kind of a mix in between authenticity and vulnerability.
yes, that's right. And authenticity is also like a point in emotional intelligence. Yeah,
But yet the true
yes,
self has some vulnerability at the same time,
yes. Everyone,
independence in a way.
yeah, that's right. We were kind of thrown into the deep end too early. And when looking back at it, maybe had we broken into small provinces like Africa, it would be different. But then we do not know, we wouldn't know what the outcome would have been back then. Yeah. But I think it all comes back to not blaming others, but blaming ourselves for where we are now. and try to fix that going into the future.
Nearly 50 years later, where do you think the country still struggles to fulfill its potential?
Yeah, there's this saying that PNG is a is float is a building a kind of a mountain of gold flow in a sea of oil powered by gas. So PNG should be like Dubai, uh, with all the riches that we have. However, this has not come to surface, and the exact opposite is happening. So for the country to really benefit, then we need more transparency. We need to increase the fight against corruption, so we can see that sort of those sort of things come to fruition. Like, what's the point of going to Sydney, Australia, when you can bring it here to PNG? Hope I answered the question.
How should younger PNG reinterpret independence for their generation?
How should they reinterpret independence for their generation?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that there's another good question because with intermarriage, like for example, my dad, he was from one province, or he's from one village. My mom is also from one village, and me, I'm from two different provinces, and then my kids are from four different provinces. And the way I see it is that hopefully along the line that we get rid of all this tribalism and everybody comes together as one. And so if the young Papua New Guineans could look at it that way, because these days when I ask a young person where you from, he counts about 8 provinces. And that kind of brings a feeling of nationalism. And I foresee that maybe in the future we won't have much division, and hopefully we have more unification when celebrating independence. Um, Also kind of recording our cultural heritage, like for example, languages, we might lose them. And we have Babel, this app where you have different languages there, and PNG could do well to retain our languages by with those sort of technology.
Is there a danger that modernization could disconnect younger people from ancestral wisdom and oral history?
Yes, Corinne, that's another good question. When we look at ancestral wisdom, like back in the day, it was passed on through word of mouth. Like my dad told me stories about his dad, and that kind of evolved and that happened with the past generations. And there was a point when I was a kid, was my dad was a radio man, was a broadcaster. He carry a tape and record like his uncle's words of wisdom and traditional traditional past and culture. I think that modern technology will enhance this. Uh, However, it's the influence, it's what people focus on, and maybe that comes with the old psychology debate of nature versus nature. If we brought up in a more aware or educated upbringing, then we'd be aware of these things. And with culture, like we have a big thing called rural urban drift, rural urban migration. I think it goes with families evolving and no space back in the village or no jobs back in the village. So people come into towns. And that could also be a factor that hinders holding on to the traditional ancestral stories and that. But I think that with the focus in the right place, modern technology can enhance that. And that could be further developed maybe through film and drama so that our kids don't lose sight of the past. But in saying that, PNG was recently legislated as a Christian nation. That must have been late last year. And so we see that as a foundational root. And for me personally, I would think that, oops, I'm sorry.
Oops.
Oh, what have you edited?
You're back.
I'm more aligned like from my learning and research, more aligned to the kingdom culture, if you know what that means. It's like we all originate from a source, and we have people who like atheists who don't believe that. But here in PNG, we call ourselves a Christian country, though sometimes I look at it as a myth. And maybe my values would be in line with like getting away from the ancestral culture. Because from my experience, like going through school in, would say, a rural area, I was exposed to a lot of these spiritual occurrences. And sometimes you would think that maybe our ancestral beliefs, there are good parts of culture. There are the good parts of culture that we should hold on to. However, when it comes to the bad side, that we could replace that with Christianity. Because when we look back in PNG and civilization, it was the missionaries that really helped explore us to gain ground into the country, first into the coastal areas and then up into the mountains. So yeah,
How important is historical memory in nation building?
I would think it's very important. Like for me, one question that was kind of a mystery to me was always thinking of our origins. Like where do we originate from? And there's not much literature around on that. There was a book that I think I must have first just showed the cover to you. I got it right here.
Yes.
Uh, the It's a parliament of 1,000 tribes. So
Can you show
it,
it
it's
again on camera, please?
it's quite complicated.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It is quite complicated when it comes to that, Corinne. I think I've taken off on another tangent. You don't mind repeating the question?
How important is historical memory in nation building or in building a
Yeah,
nation?
yeah. So it's like before independence, we don't have much literature on that. But now, as we further developing, it'd be good to like have this our history on record so that the future generations can look back and say, okay, so the country came through this period and then this happened to bring us where we are now. And hopefully that involves progressing at a faster pace than we have. So we can learn from our mistakes, from where we've been and where we're trying to head to and where we are.
And what responsibilities do intellectuals, educators, and content creators have during periods of national uncertainty?
Yes, another wonderful question. I think we have a huge responsibility to not only put out content that is appealing, but also to kind of walk the talk, to practice what we preach. That's how important it is, especially in this time of ambiguity and uncertainty and volatility. Yeah, so I classify that as very important.
I really agree with you with that one. Let's move on to spirituality, healing, and human resilience. Faith appears throughout your personal narrative. How central is spirituality to your understanding of healing and leadership?
Thank you.
And I'm actually curious as well because you mentioned you had experiences when you were young as well. And so I'll
Yes,
be curious of some stories if you have, and if you have the will
sure,
to share.
sure. Uh, Faith is like a central key to me. I was brought up that way, exposed to church where my dad always, it was like threatening when he said, when he spoke about Judgment Day, he'd say on Judgment Day, you'd have to be accountable for every little thing to God. And just thinking of it going before a court and being judged. And my mom would further solidify that by saying that as parents, we are responsible for our children's upbringing and their faith. Maybe going back to the first question. So I see faith as central. Like back in when I was in grade two, I attended a religious instruction meeting or together. We usually did that at school every week and by the Baptist church. And I ended up giving my life to God, to Jesus, and I went home so excited. Mom, I've done this. And like God just opened up. I learned how to read early and we'd read the Bible at the back of the classroom. But through life, you go through mountains and valleys, and ups and downs, and none of us are perfect or righteous. So I've fallen and I've got up again. And the only reason I've got up is I think it's to do with spirituality, that God gives that extra incentive every day to just see that little gap of of possibilities, of opportunities, and to go for it. So faith is central to everything I do. Like just going to bed at night and not knowing how we wake up the next morning, how many times our heart beats, and to wake up in the morning and to be grateful, to be given life again, because one day that won't happen. So when we have the chance to kind of grab it with both hands, and maybe that's one reason I'm also here with so much gratitude to yourself. Yeah.
During moments of despair or uncertainty, what keeps you moving forward?
At this point in time in age, I would say that it is my faith. It's starting the day off on the right note, going within through prayer and through the reading of the scripture. And that kind of gives me that as an individual, that extra edge to have the right sort of energy to tackle what's in front of me, especially when you walk out there and everything is just happening. It all
What does
just,
forgiveness
yeah,
mean in your life experience?
yes. Based on Christianity, forgiveness is central to happiness. And there's a difference. They talk about forgiving and forgetting. So I've come to a stage, I guess, personally, is that forgiveness is important, but when things keep on reoccurring, I don't think there's any hurt in kind of putting up boundaries by having limitations and not being exposed to situations or instances where you just need to keep on forgiving. But forgiveness is key and central to happiness and for peace.
Even, can you think that a nation heals socially if individuals are not emotionally and psychologically healthy?
Yeah, a nation can heal if it comes back to individuals because we make up the whole. And if we're exposed to having those Christian values and virtues, that will also help us a lot. because without it, then we just keep on kind of digressing and dwindling, and we don't really progress, not only in the major centers and urban areas, but also back in the villages. From my exposure to the village recently, from my mom's side, it seems to be okay. But back here near the capital city, it's kind of you heard of moonshine and drugs. So those things, like back in the 80s, we never really knew about them, but now they've kind of elevated. And so all
So
these spiritual groups,
in
yeah,
your view, what is the relationship between emotional intelligence and national development?
yes, it's key and it's central. Because emotional intelligence, the aspects of emotional intelligence, I can't really recall them off the back of my mind, but it's about self-awareness, awareness of others, and being genuine and authentic. And if every individual was to kind of lift the game, then definitely the whole nation would move forward.
Then I will ask a question that would be more addressed to the young generation is how do you maintain hope while discussing difficult social and political realities publicly? Hope.
Yes, hope. Yeah, that's a big one. Hope is, there's this saying like, you know God and you know hope. No God, no hope, or no God, no peace. It's like KNOW and NO. So when you know God, then you have hope. Because without knowing God, then I don't think there's much hope. And if we can get the message out, I guess that's like the, if you're a Christian, you know about the Great Commission. And it's our job to get this out to the masses, especially the younger generation, taking into consideration that no one is perfect.
Definitely. Let's move on to anthropology, legacy, and cultural continuity. Anthropologically speaking, oral storytelling preserves identity across generations. Do you see your YouTube work as a modern extension of oral tradition, Ivan? You have two YouTube channels, right?
Yes, definitely. I think it's an like kind of evolving from the traditional system, because I guess my generation, I don't know what they call it, Generation X or Y. Right now we have Gen Z, and Gen Z are more exposed to maybe like a lot of rubbish that's on the internet, and they could be more focused and obsessed on that. And so our work is to bring them away from there, because we are like the link to the previous generation, the values that they instilled, the discipline, the toughness. And for this generation, I think they're a bit soft. Yeah, so the work we do with content creation is important. And one thing I'm learning also is not to put content out there just for the sake of it, that make sure there's quality in it, maybe with the graphics we use and all that,
What
to be more
legacy do
appealing.
you hope your children inherit from you beyond material success?
The legacy I hope my children get from me, like for my dad, when he was as a broadcaster, there was a video that they shot, and I don't have it right now because we had the videotape. And when I look back at it, like it gives me that sense of pride that even back then, like my dad could do that. And so putting it into my perspective is just fighting the good fight, living the good life that my children could can go back and like just being exposed to them this past couple of years. I've seen them really evolve quicker than they did. A lot of things that I learned from my studies, I've taught them. And I think they would be proud of it as long as I know that I'm doing the right thing and that they could share with, say, my grandchildren. I already have one right now, so yeah, uh, I think it will have a big impact on them.
And what does legacy mean to you personally?
To me, legacy is, for example, when my dad and mom passed, they left the house with us. And just recently, because we've also gone bigger, the family has gone bigger, we had to leave the house. And for me, that was like a legacy that my parents left behind, like an inheritance. But that's like material wise. For me, legacy would be living a good life that is that my family would be proud of, that my kids could look up to and say that even though it was a tough life, that I succeeded. And another thing I also wrote down, hopefully it's in line with this question, is through my self-help reading and all that, I came across something where you write your own obituary. And for me, that would be like my legacy, having the courage to write down how people would remember me.
And if future generations watch your videos decades from now, what do you hope they understand about this moment in PNG history?
Yes, I would like them to, with the kind of work that I've been led into, which is like at the broader level in society, being involved in politics in the background. I hope that with the videos that we do now, people can look back after 20, 30, maybe 50 years and say, oh, the place used to look like this before, like it was so underdeveloped, and now it's like this. And like that would have that transformation on kind of on record for the future generations to see. And maybe also not physically, but mentally, the way we think and that sort of thing.
And how should indigenous knowledge systems coexist with formal academic education?
Yes, they can peacefully coexist. In countries, the way I see it, like for example in China or in countries where they don't speak English, they teach in their languages. And I really don't see any harm in like villagers teaching in their local language. And maybe that sort of teaching could be documented, like because we're in the modern world and to gain an advantage, like when we grow up and if we get involved in dealing internationally, we have to speak the same language as the international what on the international scene. Like for example, um, I'm sure Portugal has its own language,
Mhm.
and for you to also speak English fluently, like that is amazing.
Well, my mother is British, so it helped a little bit.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was born French, so I speak French, and my French accent is always coming back in every languages. I,
Wow.
s- but
Yeah.
it helped. And so I studied in France, and in France, English was the first language. So
Oh,
I guess it helped. The academic system helped there, or here in
yeah.
Europe, at least. Portuguese, they speak very well English as well,
Yeah.
because at a very early age, they have subtitles, English subtitles on TV.
Yes.
So it helped as well, I guess.
Yeah. For
Uh,
us here in PNG, English, like I said, my dad never wanted me to speak talk fishing,
mhm.
and my mom was not that good of a like multilingual type. So my other aunties picked up my dad's language, and my mom didn't. And I think that also flowed down to me. But I think my problem is because of the talk fishing. sometimes I can stutter a bit.
And what do you
Uh,
think? My grandma was from Praha. She was Czechoslovakian, and my father was Portuguese. He passed away, as I told you. And
yeah,
so with my father, it was a long, hard journey because I never learned Portuguese. I learned Portuguese when I was a kid during, holidays, and that's it. And by
yeah,
listening to people. But my
yeah.
grandma used to say she spoke 6 languages, and she used to say that we have a brain for each language. And I really believe it. I mean, when I speak
Mm,
English, even my voice changed. And if
really?
eu agora vou falar um pouco de português, também o som da minha voz vai mudar. Et si je vous parle en français maintenant, eh ben, c'est complètement différent. Je suis peut-être bien plus à l'aise parce que c'est plus naturel. There is
Mm,
something, that changes in the mind as well, in
mm.
our nervous system, I would say. What do you think of that?
I really think that like that's quite profound. I thought I was going to use those words more in the interview, like deep and profound as compared to shallow. And like we learn something new every day. So I think I'm learning something new. Like back in the day, I, I started this fish business in the early 2000s, and I'd take it home to my dad's. I'd go back to my dad's village. Growing up, we did learn. My grandma always spoke. She couldn't speak in English, but I never really knew her. She got sick by the time I was growing up. But my parents always spoke in like my dad's language, my aunties, my uncles, and my dad. And I grew up listening to it. I couldn't even, I can't even speak it to this day. But when I went home to bring fish over, I was picking it up and I can listen to it. But now I know that there's one, it's like a different brain, right?
It
And
is.
I've also
Ivan,
tried my
what
best.
wisdom, what wisdom from village life should never be lost?
Yes, the wisdom from village life that I really think it comes back to our values, like respect, having respect for our elders. And that part, I think it should never be lost. The other thing is hard work, especially I paid a visit to the village a year ago. And because I'm kind of a clean freak, I like cleaning places up when I get bored. I actually clean, it's like when I was cleaning the place, I thought, I hope my ancestors are looking down at me smiling. And those are the things that we should never lose sight of. And especially to do with littering, because that shows like what's inside of us. And right now here in PNG, that's also a big problem. So I would think that those values that are associated with that, respect, um, cleanliness, and those things I mentioned, they should never be lost.
And if you could preserve one cultural value forever with PNG, what would it be? Cultural value.
Mhm. I think that one would be easy. If I'm talking about cultural, something that we value culturally, it would be language. Maybe it goes back to Wantok. Yeah, if language can be preserved, then everything else is all documented. Like at school, people learn traditional dances and that, but it would be the language that we hope doesn't die out. Or I hope personally.
I guess language is everything about communication, how we can understand the other. One talk to me, and
Yes.
that leads to more tolerance. And I guess there is a
Mm.
disunion in our world, global issues, global wars, because of a lack of communication, understanding
Yes.
the other, but understanding comes from listening. So language as a silence maybe should be cultivated more often. Listen
Yeah.
to the other to
Very
understand
true.
yourself better and get back within. in a way.
Yeah, another deep, profound thing you just mentioned, that listening should be a language itself.
Now about reflection and personal closing, Ivan. What would you say to Papua New Guineans who feel hopeless about the future?
What I would say to Papua New Guineans who are hopeless about the future, the first thing I'd say is run to God because He's the source of everything. We say sometimes we question why do bad things happen to good people, but there's some questions that we wouldn't know the answer to, and for me that would be one. For in terms of hope for Papua New Guineans, maybe the biggest thing that's coming to me right now is the kind of leadership we've seen coming on the political scene since the last elections in 2022. We've got leaders now who are fighting against the grain, who are swimming upstream. And my advice to all Papua New Guineans, especially those in adulthood from 18 years and above and who have the power to vote, is to use that power, people's power, to vote for leaders who really have that vision and value the people so that we do not have to travel far to see development, but we can see it happening in our own places, and our children, our younger generations can grow up with this.
What
So
advice would
to,
you give fathers struggling to rebuild their lives about or after failure?
the advice I would give to fathers is to feel that pain and to feel that hunger and use that as motivation to become better people every day, better than yesterday, and to seek divine intervention because we cannot do everything with our own strength. We need to really go within, and it helps us to think outside the box. I used to wonder what thinking outside the box was. But when I got into the postgraduate studies, to me personally, I think that to be able to, I think they call it metacognition, thinking about thinking, uh, is that we have to go in within ourselves, and maybe those light bulb moments can occur. And to be encouraged that others have gone through it, like I myself, 30 years of pain and despair, and I'm still standing today. So that would be the encouragement to others. If others can do it, then why can't you?
And what has your son Elijah taught you through this journey together?
Yeah, I go back to my sons, Elijah, my firstborn, Iga, and my secondborn, Numa. They were born when I was 20, 24, 25. Elijah, what I would say is that the journey, it's to do with like education, because he studied engineering and now he's into online trading and helping me with content creation. And I look at the the education system as kind of a bit outdated, uh, with especially with modern technology, where we hear stories of people making a good life from, say, AI and technology. My son Elijah seems to be more like they say the survival of the fittest. All my children, they seem to be more smarter than me, and by taking this lead, my daughter is critical. She's 17 this year. When I talk about content creation, she rolls her eyes. Um, she wants to do well in school and become a pilot. So for Elijah getting involved, it's exposing him to this. And hopefully the next couple of years, we see some fruits, and that should just inspire the whole family.
What does
Yeah.
success mean to you now? compared to when you were younger?
Yeah, success to me now compared to when I was younger. When we were young, it's all about pride, I think, and ego. But now that I've advanced and I'm getting older, I think success to me is more about having that inner peace. Whether we have money or not, um, there's this other influencer, Myron Golden, who talks about who talks about rich glad and poor glad, or rich sad and poor sad. So when going through our struggles, if we can be glad, if we can be happy, and when say prosperity, money wise comes, then you'll still be happy. But if we're sad or if we are mad with our nothingness, and even when prosperity comes, I don't think we'll change much. So to
Is there a
me,
question? Is there a
uh,
question you
enough.
wish people asked more often about Papua New Guinea, PNG?
Yeah, the question I think people would ask more is to do with our local untouched rainforests and our oceans. Even though lately there was a volcano that erupted underwater at my mom's place, which it was a really beautiful place, so like virgin. And now I've heard that there's sediments around there. Those are the sort of questions that like I'd really love to have instead of just focusing on the city and all the trouble that's happening here. That would be one. And maybe the other is the questions you've been asking, like about the village settings and how it is back there. Taking into mind that like it's just been a century or so since we've come into colonization.
So we will remember those two questions. So you have to
Yeah.
create a little or two different videos to explain those after. It will be interesting
Yes.
about the environment and the volcano, how things
Yeah.
came.
I've got
Yeah,
yeah, I've got
it will
some
be
footage.
interesting.
I'm sorry. I've got some footage of when I went over in March. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll try hopefully I can get hold of a laptop soon. Yeah.
Excellent. So finally, when history remembers your contribution, Ivan, how would you want to be remembered?
Okay, with that one, maybe from a human point of view, I'll probably use a farm animal metaphor. I'd say I'd like to be remembered as an underdog, a black sheep who never really kind of deserved what I thought I worked hard for, maybe in terms of promotions in the workplace, uh, someone who chases dreams, who there's this song, I'm not sure if you heard about it or you heard of it, it's by Casting Crowns, and they say only Jesus. The title of the song is Only Jesus. Because at the end of the day, all this world offers you is like empty promises. And for my legacy, it would be surviving 5 car accidents or more, uh, because of the grace of God and His mercy, and that He spared me for a purpose, a specific purpose, and that's to help and serve those around me.
Tonight's conversation reminds us that legacy is not built only through institutions or titles. Sometimes it begins quietly, through fatherhood, survival, study, reflection, faith, and the courage to speak openly in service of community. In many ways, the philosophy of Wantok remains one of humanity's most powerful social ideas, that identity is relational, responsibility is shared, and no person stands entirely alone. We thank Sir Ivan Kila for sharing his story his convictions, and his visions of Papua New Guinea's future. And to our audience, may we continue listening across cultures, generations, and histories, because movement without memory is only motion, but movement with memory becomes legacy. This has been Legacy in Motion by Wantok Production. Thank you for joining us.
Obrigado. Thank you, Colin. It's been a pleasure. Amazing.
Right, I will cut here. We have 1 minute here, but if you
Yeah.
want, we can debrief on WhatsApp, or do you want to reconnect on Zoom just to debrief before? Which
Up to you,
one?
Colin. Just one thing that I forgot to say in the
Ah,
end, if you can just, I'd like to say God bless you
I was
with your
about to
work.
say, but I didn't dare to add this one. Do you want to say God bless you?
Yes, please.
I will, yeah, when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you again, Colin. It's such a pleasure to be asked by you to come on to this. I never knew that creating content would start with this. So I'd like to wish God's blessings upon you in the work you do and upon your family also, and also a blessings always to our viewers.